Welcome to the Old Man's Corner. Pull up a chair and a cup of coffee and come on in. Welcome to the Old Man's Corner. Today I want to talk a little bit about school days. Some of my favorite teachers and subjects that I took throughout the years. I attended grade school at Irving Elementary. Had several different teachers, of course, at different times. One of my favorite was Mrs. Rosecrans. She was a 5th grade teacher. In fact, her son was also in the class. She was a very polite and kind of a reserved woman, actually, but she was very creative in the things she'd have us do. I remember one time she was having us do little skits. We had to pick a partner, and then we had to come up with a little skit that lasted just a short while to perform in front of the class. And I remember the little skit that I did with my partner was we were cowboys and we were having a gunfight. And that was something that kind of threw me, because I didn't understand what the importance of all that was. I just thought this was just playing around, but she was teaching us to work together with one another, and that kind of worked, because out on the playground, sometimes out on the playground we didn't always get together and get along, so that helped a lot. Also in grade school, as I kept moving on up, I got into Mrs. Campbell's class. She was a sweet person too. She was a little bit stricter on her thing. She expected you to do the assignments and have it done, and there was just no leeway here or there. But she was a very good person, you know. Outside of school, occasionally we'd go over and mow her lawn. She lived over on 9th Street because she'd lost her husband and she didn't have anybody to do anything over there, so we'd go over and mow the lawn and go visit her once in a while. And then as I progressed on a little bit further, we got into 6th grade. I got into Mr. Keller, who was also the principal. And he was an interesting guy. He was bald-headed man, kind of short, and he had a sense of humor when he was in the class teaching. He wasn't so humorless or such when he was being the principal of the school, but overall he was a nice guy, and he loved teaching. You could tell that. I guess that's why they chose him to be the principal of the school. As I progressed on a little bit further, got into junior high, I enjoyed like English classes. I remember one of my teachers was Mrs. Adazada. She was of course, being a teenage boy, she was an attractive young woman on top of that. So it wasn't that hard to come to class for English. And I enjoyed reading a lot of the works of people like Edgar Allan Poe and Shakespeare, and these are some of the things that I enjoyed reading, and so that class wasn't that hard. And I also had a typing teacher. Her name was Miss Young. She was fairly young too. She was like 26 or so when she was teaching. Another very attractive woman that all the boys, especially in the typing class, really enjoyed going to class. Now, the girls didn't particularly like it so much because as boys, we figured out a few things, you know. Miss Adada, she was, if you needed help, she would come, you know, to your typewriter and bend over and talk to you. Well, that's being boys. Of course, top of her dress fell open a little bit, so needless to say, her hands were going up quite a bit, needing help. And the girls realized what was going on, so they got a little upset with all that. She later ended up, just later on in the year, she ended up marrying one of the Spanish teachers, Mr. Bonomi. And that kind of put it into all that stuff anyways. But I enjoyed those classes. I took a Spanish class, and I had two different teachers at times. I had Mr. Baptista. He was one of my favorite. He's the one that I learned the most from. I took Spanish 1 through 6, and Spanish 2 to 6. I had him as a teacher, and he was a very funny person. He was in the National Guard, and he talked about that a lot. He enjoyed doing that. And later on, he also became a principal there at the high school. But he was always, especially in conversational Spanish, he was always trying to get you to speak to him in Spanish. Well, I wasn't that keen on out there, in public speaking with the people in Spanish, but I didn't mind it in the class. But he was one of those people. He told us, he says, now if I see you out in the hallway somewhere and I yell at you, then I expect you to reply in Spanish. So needless to say, when we were all, at least for me, when I was out in the halls of the high school, if I saw him, I tried to take off and go down and go up one of the other stairs, and he'd always see it, and he'd always go, Señor Lambert, ¿qué pasa? And he expects you to respond in Spanish. And it was because he'd be yelling over everybody that was in there, and they'd all be looking at you like, okay, what are you going to do? But he was kind of humorous, and he allowed us to expand our knowledge in Spanish too. He had us doing little skits as well. We could bring in props and different things, but it all had to be done in Spanish. So that was very interesting. He was probably one of my mentors. He at the time I started into his classes, I was kind of a rowdy type of person. I wasn't attending school as much as I should have been. I wasn't paying attention to schoolwork as much as I really should have been, but he helped me kind of get settled down in that type of stuff because I enjoyed going to his classes. Sometimes in the later years I'd skip a lot of other classes, but I'd go to his. And he was just a funny man. But also in the beginning of my first Spanish class, there was another Mrs. Young. She was in Spanish 1. I don't know how it is that all these people that teach in high school, they're all attractive young women, the ones that taught. Well, not all of them, most of them. But some weren't. Some had been there for 20 or 30 years, and they were like Mrs. Buffum. She was a very nice person, but she was very strict. She taught English, and she was very, very strict on what she expected from you. And Mrs. Flick, she was the same way. She taught senior English. She taught the English class that you had to take to graduate. And so, unfortunately, I liked English classes. I wasn't real fond of that because it was more a grammar class, and I'm not all that grammar and punctuation geared up on type stuff. I just enjoy reading and things like that, and writing some things. But then, of course, you have to, I guess, know a little bit about grammar and punctuation if you're going to do too much writing. But there's where I got really interested into a lot of poetry writing, and I started writing poetry about that time, and wrote for several years. And later on, won several awards for my poetry, and joined the Kansas Authors Club, and wrote some poems and short stories, and I had some of them published in books and in newspapers and such, and I enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. Those are some of the people that I really enjoyed in school as teachers and instructors. They all taught me something, if I was willing to listen. And I did. After I quit school and came back, and I kind of buckled down. I had quit for years. I thought, well, school wasn't any good for me. But then when I was gone for a year, I decided, well, you ain't gonna get a job. You're not gonna get this or that. So you better, well, and you ain't got nothing else to do. So I went back to school, and I really started cracking down, and I enjoyed that part. I had a few tussles with the vice principal, which was Mr. Lundgren. Matter of fact, when I graduated, he told me, he said, I didn't think he was ever going to make it. I said, well, you're not the only one. And I saw him many years later. Matter of fact, just probably about 5 years ago, when I was living in Winfield in one of the apartments there, and he was coming to deliver medicine, and he was on the elevator with me. And he said, I remember you. And I said, yeah, I remember you too. And he goes, yeah, we had some pretty tough times once in a while there, but you turned out okay. I'm glad you did that. And I said, so am I. So nowadays, you see them out on the streets, the ones that are still alive. And I guess at least I left something in their memories, because they remember me. But these are just some of the things that I enjoyed in school, some of the teachers and such that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed, like I said, a lot of the classes, Spanish, and I enjoyed that. I had a French teacher too. Her name was Mrs. Converse. She was a very, very attractive young lady. And my brother, Dan, I was taking French 1. And my brother Danny was like in French 3 or 4 or something like that. But he had the same teacher, but a different time. And I was in there with a young man named Clayton, and we had to have some French names that she chose for us. And Clayton and I was always cutting up in there. He was a character. And one day he came in, and there was an apple sitting on Mrs. Converse's desk. And she looked at me and said, thank you. And I didn't do that. So I thought Clayton did it because he was a jokester. So I was kind of embarrassed about that and all that. And then come to find out it was my older brother, Danny, that did it. And he knew that she would think I did it. So she also, later married one of the teachers there as well. So I guess school is a good place for teachers to meet other teachers and to marry. So anyways, I just wanted to share some of that with you. I just sat and thinking about it. And if you have any teachers or people that instructed you somewhere along the way that helped you or inspired you to do things, share that with us. Give us a holler about that type of stuff. And maybe this is a way that you can thank them also if they ever watch your stuff. So I just also wanted to share a thing with you here. I've got a friend that's got a YouTube channel called Stitching in the Pines. So if you get an opportunity to go see Susie over at Stitching in the Pines, if you like especially crocheting and yarn and things of that sort, she's very good at it. She's done it for several years. And I think you'd be happy if you do that type of thing. So I just want to share this stuff with you. I just want to let you know I love you and I appreciate you. And we'll talk to you later.